Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Forever West Old Time Radio Hour featuring James Townsend and myself, Das Boot. We want to thank everyone for joining us live again here Thursday, 7 p.m. EST. And James, you
Yes,
are
sir.
there. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check. James is there. All right. So before we get going, I do want to thank everyone who tuned in to our 2 episodes on Deputy U.S. Marshal W.H. Carr, William Hayden Carr. It was very fun, very intriguing to go down the paths of these lawmen who are also very trigger happy and have very mysterious backgrounds or no backgrounds at all, and really interesting stuff. And some of these guys tied in with the kid here and there, or Fred Waite, little things like that we saw along the path. But today we're gonna change it up. It's gonna be a real different mode, the method here is going to be very different because today we're going to be dealing with someone I know that has made it onto your imposter list, because ever since I've met you, you have been very, very diligent in this research, and I know it's something that's always interested you, and just the idea who these men tried to make people believe they were. In a way, it's like, man, I don't know if it's the audacity, the bravery, the ballsiness of it. It's just crazy. And I know this gentleman fit into that category as well, and that's where we're going to go. So today we're going to talk about John James, sometimes referred to as John Jesse James throughout some of this. And this is someone who, around the turn of the century, from what I can tell, began popping up here and there and began laying on the line to anybody that would listen that he was a cousin of Jesse James. Is that correct?
That's correct. He would go by John James, and every now and then he would go by John William James or Jim Williams occasionally. The thing is I want to really point out to folks starting out, okay? I really want you to picture the 1930s, 1940s. It's a time when Wild West movies are coming out. The legends are getting made. Billy the Kid has just been immortalized by Burns in 1926. Jesse James silent movies are coming out.
Right.
Everything is just very heroic. And a guy comes forward and he starts telling folks around the country that Jesse James was not really killed in 1882. He says a man by the name of Charlie Bigelow was killed, and that for the next, intermediate years between 1882 and 19 whenever, Jesse James has lived a quiet, unassuming life under many aliases, and he's come back home to request a pardon or to come clean. And to a lot of people, that story, especially the Charlie Bigelow part, will sound like the most famous Jesse James imposter, J. Frank Dalton.
Right.
And J. Frank Dalton was well known for the Charlie Bigelow story. That was like the biggest plot point in his tale.
Right.
So I was astonished to find the Charlie Bigelow yarn had cropped up prior to J. Frank Dalton in another man who claimed to be Jesse James. And this is a guy who received much less attention In fact, I would say that John James is very uh, rarely known about these days. Everybody wants to talk about J. Frank Dalton, and hardly anybody ever brings up John James. And the more I looked into him, the more fascinated I became. And like you said, I don't know if it's the just the brazenness or the audacity of people in this time period to
Mhm.
try to take on what they did, but it has always fascinated me. And finding out their story and who they were and what kind of led them there has always been a huge fascination of me. And
Right.
there's so many of them out there, man. That's one of the things that when I talk to brushy people,
Yeah.
brushy believers who are just all about Brushy Bill, I want to tell them, like, look, the more you dig into this, man, Brushy wasn't even one of the good imposters. Like these
No.
guys, I feel like, if John James's story had turned out a little bit differently, he could have taken the whole world for a ride. But a lot more imposters are out there than we know, and a lot of them had way more commitment and charisma than Brushy Bill or J. Frank Dalton. Now, let me see. I'm looking at a no. I see Colin has thrown up a question mark, but yes, John James, Colin. That's who we're talking about tonight. And so I really, I'm going to jump around. I'm going to try to take folks on the trail as I encountered it.
Okay.
And the first time that John James really came to prominence in the Jesse James stream was around October of 1931. And Je- Jesse James, man, and I'm sure you'll relate. We have just not, we barely dipped our big toe into the Jesse James waters. I'm sure that goes for you as much as it
Yeah,
goes for me.
I'm a newbie.
Yeah.
I know the basics, and here's the thing, we've talked about this as so many years back when I set out on a path, I legitimately did say to myself, I can't I'm interested in so much, but I can't spread myself too far,
Yeah.
right? Like I literally said I want to be really knowledgeable, in-depth knowledge on a specific topic or, and it ended up being Billy in the Lincoln County War, Garrett, and then it just starts to um like veins, right? It just starts to
Yeah.
just spread
Hmm.
everywhere, like in my body. And I'm like, I need to know about Pat Garrett's kids, right? So I never so far have had that waning interest to go down the Jesse James route. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? So I know that, but not like I'm not interested. Um, I saw the film The Long Riders when I was about 11 years old. It was one of the
Hmm.
first films that I had ever seen, in relation to the James Younger gang, and so I had always had that film in the back of my head when thinking about the James gang and what they went through, and
Oh yeah.
that film has a great the Northfield raid, right, in
Oh
Minnesota.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that whole description of that and how they decided to shoot it in that film was stayed with me for so long because they did it in like slow motion, and when the guys are getting shot down and the whole town is just shooting them up, and so but unfortunately, that's where the interest has mainly kind of kept me
Yeah.
at bay is
Yeah.
the films, right? Because I tell myself I've got to go down, I've got to kind of start moving the kid history out of my memory bank and out of my, you know what I mean, off my tongue and off my get the passion away and then try to dig into something else. And I'm just not, ready to do that yet. So,
Yeah.
um, but
Well,
I know,
I'll say this
yeah, go
about
ahead.
Jesse James, like the little that I've gotten into it is that Jesse James is probably the most famous outlaw when it comes to the American West globally, and the most recognizable name, I would say. And I feel like because of the insane amounts of legend and myth that has built
Yeah,
up around Jesse James, far more than Billy the Kid, even. I mean, there
true.
has just been so much myth around him that it is it is a chore to find out the truth and to go through primary sources and
Yeah,
things like that because the myth and the legend has made it so hard to know what's really true. The
Yeah,
storytelling, the every old timer who remembers Jesse James, but also on the other end, Jesse James and his brother Frank and the Youngers and the other gentlemen involved in his gang, these guys for a while were actually pretty good outlaws, and their goal of remaining hidden and out of sight, they actually achieved pretty well at certain times. So
right.
there's large gaps in their timeline where you really don't know where they are, and so it's hard to even rely on primary documents. Much much to the contrary when it comes to the kid, who you pretty much always know he's in New Mexico, between somewhere in
Right.
Lincoln County, like
Yeah, good
you
point.
know.
Good point.
But
And then
like you're
with
like,
it,
is Jesse in Nebraska? Is he in Texas? Is he
yeah,
in New Mexico? Is he in Missouri? Like, where is he?
right. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm realizing just now it kind of clicked that, well, Jesse, if you are seeking the absolute fullest truth, then what happens? You got to know about Jesse. You got to know about Frank. You got to know about the mom Z. You got to know about the young brother who was killed during the Pinkerton raid
Yeah.
when they threw the, like, what was it, like? It wasn't a Molotov cocktail. It was like a
No, it was like
bomb.
a little
Some kind.
bomb. Yeah, like a
Yeah.
little grenade.
Right.
And you gotta know about Quantrill's Raiders. You gotta know
Raiders.
about
Yeah.
the
Their
Missouri
war records
Guerrillas.
and their,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, there's so
So
much, dude.
right. So when you mention that, exactly, you have a lot more to take in, and you also have a little bit more with Jesse, probably an easier track to early background stuff because of the things that he was involved in, and he was by his
Mhm.
brother's side at such a young age that I know that. Well, with Billy, you've got, no real true information on the father still to this day. And his mother dies when he's young. He gets
Right.
separated from his brother. And then he's just, I mean, he's a drifter who ends
Yeah.
up, right in the middle of a merchant war.
Yeah.
While Jesse, I think it's pretty safe to say when you peel back those true sources, it's pretty, I don't know if it's easy to establish, but I know I've seen some from you in the past and in general in documentaries or in books that Jesse was a killer at heart, even at a young age.
He didn't seem to have a problem with it, and I don't know if a
No.
lot of that was because of what he went through as a guerrilla fighter in the
Yeah.
Civil War. Maybe that kind of molded him because he was just about, I don't know, 14 to 16, somewhere around
14 to
there.
16. Yeah.
But I mean, even looking at the length of his career, look how much we argue and go back and forth about Billy, whose career
Right.
can basically, as an outlaw, can basically be framed up between 1877 and 1881. And you've got Jesse, who immediately after the end of the war in 1865, by 1866, you've got the Liberty Bank robbery, which he probably wasn't involved in, but knew his little fraternity of guerrillas who were. And then
Right.
from there on, from 1866 to 1882, you've got bank robberies, train robberies, stagecoach robberies, and stuff that
Right.
he's involved in. That's so much going on.
Right.
Yeah, John
Yeah.
Wilson. John Wilson says there's so much about Jesse in a lot of years. It's just a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe what, I don't know if it's a fear of me going, deciding to want to know everything like I wanted to know about Kid and
Yeah,
Garrett. And at first, it just starts off as a kid, but then you realize that, Pat and Billy can't exist without each other. Sorry,
right.
but they can't. You've got to know about Pat. And so in this case, like again, all the people that are connected, the people in his gang,
Yeah,
the younger brothers, then you want to learn about them. So it is a lot. I want to go back to the John James guy. Now, do you think, because this is obviously an opinion thing, because I was reading this thing, he shows up at this fair like way back 1903 and starts saying,
mhm.
cousin just James. Do you think because of the way people communicated at the turn of the century, and as the frontier times are now beginning to wane out a little bit, vehicles are now taking over, you see those differences even in Red Dead 2 when you play it, like, right, all the power poles are up, the power lines are up.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
all these differences, and that's the whole point of the game is the West is dying down. Now, so because of that, and because his name just happened, last name just happened to be James,
right.
do you think that the people who begin catching on to this, and with J. Frank Dalton, the ones who just ate it up, do
Mhm.
you think that that's because of the era, that it was just as simple as telling someone, "Hey, my birthday is December 25th, 1885. It's just as simple as going, well, yeah, Jesse didn't die. No, he's
Yeah.
been living in Stillwater, Arizona for
Right.
1882, right? That's what he was saying.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder because of the inability to do certain levels of research, I'm guessing back then, and people just didn't know. So I
Hmm.
just figured if you've got a last name like James and you know the background of the James gang, right? Whatnot, I would imagine it would be real easy to captivate an audience like
Dude,
that.
absolutely.
Like
Just
in
with the right
1903,
amount,
like, yeah,
the,
I'm picturing
just
these people
the
at this
perfect
fair.
amount of confidence, you know?
Right, right. I'm picturing these people at this fair in Iowa when he pops up telling this stuff in 1903. Then 22 years later, he pops back up 1924, says, oh, he just died in 1918, and
Right.
starts saying all this stuff. But again, like J. Frank Dalton, taking from this guy, Brushy taking from, Billy, and then the John Miller stuff. Again, what we're actually kind of seeing is it sucks, but you're also seeing Jesse's real history. You start to see it trail off, right? The
Yeah.
same thing with
Yeah.
kid. The more and more people put out misconceptions and falsehoods, you start to lose a little bit of the grasp that you felt like maybe you had on the history that you were learning, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And like you're talking about how many imposters there are. So I just wanted to
Right.
bring that up, like, why did people get so enthralled with these gentlemen who were doing this for damn near 50 to 80 years after these outlaws were long and dead? You know what I
Right.
mean? And how many people just automatically like, wow, you're kidding. Like, you know what I mean? I believe it was that easy for some.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so we're talking about John James when he really just goes full throttle
Yeah.
and just takes that leap of, I don't know whether you want to call it insanity or what. I think in his case it was. It's somewhere around October of 1931. Um,
Okay.
and he's an old drifter. He has a wagon pulled by a couple of horses,
Right.
and he shows up in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, and he parks out of town, and he starts hanging out at the Elms Hotel, and like any old timer, just hanging out, talking with the other old guys, um, swapping stories, everything like that. Well, the owner of the Elms Hotel, Fred Hagel, is also the mayor of Excelsior Springs. So
I see.
he gets to know John James, this wild, tall tale telling blowhard. And he convinces Fred Hagel and the chief of police at the time um to he convinces them that he is Jesse James. He's at first he's talking to him and he's like, he asked the chief, if I did something a long time ago and, I've reformed since then, but it's been maybe 50 years. Can I still get in trouble? All that good stuff, kind of
Right.
prying. And the chief of police, I think his name was Bill Payne. He said, "No, I pretty much think you'll be okay." He goes, "Well, well, I'm Jesse James," and so this was really
Hmm.
other than random newspaper gossip here and there. This is probably the first time a guy has come to Missouri and just said directly to any kind of civil authority, "I'm the outlaw Jesse James," and the chief believes him. He's
Yeah,
become sympathetic. Yeah, I mean
I was
he's
gonna
become
say.
sympathetic to the man. So the mayor and the chief of police both believe this guy,
Yeah.
and they move him into a shack behind the Royal Hotel. They kind of put him up there for a little bit, and the mayor and the chief agree to take John James to Jefferson City and meet with the governor, Henry Caulfield. And so just the fact that this old man was able to show up and someone believes him like this, I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm
he had to be pretty convincing, pretty talented. Yeah.
right. And we were just talking about this is what people really choose to believe and what they don't. And right off the bat here, in January 1932, what you're discussing with Mayor Fred Hagel, Chief of Police William Payne, it
Mm-hmm.
literally says Payne, who said he knew Jesse James as a boy, and said
Right.
he viewed his body in 1882 and did not believe it was Jesse James. And there you go. Someone in law enforcement out loud stating, I don't believe that's Jesse.
Right.
And back then, again, you gotta, okay. So here's someone who backs me up. Who's he? He's the chief of police who knew Jesse as a boy,
Yeah.
right? So then maybe at that time, people start looking like, oh, maybe he's got a little bit of credibility.
Yeah.
It's just
And
that simple.
and he knows so much about Missouri. He says they go to meet the governor,
Right.
and they're all sitting around and talking, and Governor Caulfield is even impressed by John James's recollections of Jefferson City. He's able to tell the, hey, this building used to be here. I remember when this was like this. So they summon people like Payne, who claimed to have known the real Jesse James.
Right.
Within minutes, John James can call their names and he can tell them information about their past and their families. So again, I mean, that's pretty, like you said about the 1930s, there were not Google searches where you could pull up documented facts or where you could easily go to
Right.
primary sources. They've got a guy here who says, I'm Jesse James. I know the history of your family. Your uncle used to do this, work in this stable and all this, and it's blowing their minds.
Yeah.
And I thought this was funny in typical fashion. You can see this the same way people talk today about facial recognition software. they
Yeah.
call it an eye doctor, Edward Norwood. And he comes in and he compares the eyes. He takes a photograph of Jesse James and he
Okay.
compares the eyes with John James. And he says it's a perfect match. The
Grief.
measurements, the way they line up. I mean, this is basically the facial recognition argument of the 1930s. So Dr. Edward Norwood says this is a match. This photo is a match to this guy who claims to be, 80 or 90.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm interested in the part where okay, so the chief of police, and he says that he needs sufficient proof, and John James said he spent 6 months in an Illinois prison 4 years ago for shooting a man. The victim tried to hold him up. Officers at Southern Illinois Penitentiary said a man giving the name Jesse James was imprisoned June 9th, 1926 for manslaughter in connection with the killing of Everett Shelton in
Mhm.
Jackson County, Illinois. Served 18 months of a year to life sentence and then was paroled. Now, here's what I find interesting right here. In 1932, little details that if you just catch him, right? When he entered prison, he told him he was a cousin of Jesse James and was born in Clay County, Missouri. He spent the greater part of his life in Colorado and that his wife was dead and that he had no brothers, right? Well, the no brother part is going to be a problem for him later. Like, it's just these little information. Well, I entered prison. He wasn't trying to be Jesse when he entered the prison, right? But he's saying that, okay, later I'm going to be, I'm going to be Jesse, but I've already stated verbally that I don't have brothers.
Well,
It's just little things like that, that I was
yeah,
just like trying to catch. You could just kind of go back and look at the documentation and go, well, okay, Charlie Bigelow. Now he says that Ford killed a man named Thomas Howard, right?
yeah, it was
Which is
Thomas Howard
actually
early on.
Jesse's alias,
Yeah,
right? But he claimed that Jesse's alias was actually Charlie Howard.
yeah,
Huh.
yep. And this
So
is how he would have
any
looked when he rolled into Excelsior Springs.
oh wow.
Yeah, yep, in the flesh.
Just a frail old man.
Yeah, and another example, this old man walks in and he tells Chief Payne that he used to go swimming with Jesse James all the time. And Jesse James had one of the largest moles he'd ever seen on his left shoulders. Well, John James strips off his shirt and there's a mole on his shoulder. So that again, that's proof positive that this is Jesse James. And then John James proceeded to tell Chief Payne, if you go to this fence post in town
Mhm.
in front of a certain house, if that fence post is still there, he had hidden an old pocket watch that had belonged to a Pinkerton detective there. Well, Chief Payne goes out there with some people, and they take the fence post down, and sure enough, they find a watch.
What?
Yeah, so they say so all this stuff is adding up. They're like, this man, this is getting real, and so they're getting excited. And then, yeah, Matt Carr says that cravat's a look. It is a look, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, he is making a stir. This guy has got the charisma. He's got the memories. He's got the pocket watches under the fence posts. And this is about the time, like you were just alluding to, uh, Chief Payne gets a call from Illinois, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, we think we know this guy. He he killed a man back in
Right.
1926." And he's like, the Illinois police are like, "This guy uh shot and killed a guy in 1926. He was paroled a year later, and he skipped parole, and we would like to talk about getting him back." And so, yeah, like you said, it's 1926. This guy, John James, rolls into Murfreesboro, Illinois on a wagon drawn by horses, and he's just a vagrant hanging out. And
Huh.
there's this family called the Sheltons, and he gets into some like horse trading with the Sheltons. And there's this deal where apparently um this Shelton, Everett Shelton, kind of shorted John James 50 cents. And so when this later deal went down,
Wow.
John James shorted
Yeah.
Everett 50 cents because he said, "You owe me 50 cents." So one day, John James is rolling up the hill in Murfreesboro in 1926, and Everett Shelton and his brother are out working on an engine, and they see the wagon pass, and Everett's like, "I'm going to go get my 50 cents." So according to John James, he walked up and he said, "If you don't give me the 50 cents, I'm going to beat it out of you." And John James kind of just drove on. Well, when he came back through town, he saw Everett run out in front of his wagon. And having been told prior that Everett was going to beat the 50 cents out of him,
Right.
John pulls his pistol and just shoots him.
Oh
Like
boy.
just shoots the guy, and he drives off. He literally just, and the brother sees this old man just pull a gun, shoot his brother, and drive off. And so they load Everett into a car, and he's dead within like 10-20 minutes.
Right.
Um, John James is picked up. He's charged with murder. He pleads to manslaughter. He's sentenced to 1 year to life. It's quite a range there,
Yeah.
but he serves about 18 months and they let him off. And so he's paroled, but he skips parole. So, I mean, for close to, he was like 5 years short of a decade. He just wandered around a parole violator, an old man parole violator. And when he shows up and starts saying he's Jesse James, that's when Illinois is like, "Hey, we might want to catch up with this guy."
Right. I was gonna say, looking back at his photo, he kind of slightly reminds me of he's like a it's like a frontier Palpatine.
Yeah, wow. Yeah,
He's
that's
a Senator
hilarious.
Palpatine. Put a hood on him. Yeah, I was just looking. He's got that frail, bony, like that falcon kind of face. Yeah, kind of remind me of that.
Well, so in Excelsior Springs in 1931, when Illinois starts saying, "Hey, we want our guy back," a lawyer is hired by a few of the people around John to contest his extradition. And so he wasn't extradited at that time. They keep fighting it. Um, Frank James's son, Robert, so this is Jesse's nephew, went and visited and was aggressive, obviously, towards John James. Didn't believe a bit of it.
Yeah.
And there's something else that kind of mystified me, and I messaged you about this. There's this guy named C.E. Shelton who
Yeah.
shows up, which is the brother's name from
Of
Illinois
yeah, the
of
guy
the
he
guy he
shot.
shot. Right,
Yeah.
C.E. Shelton. And Chief Bill Payne says ever since he's believed that this is Jesse James, ever since a man he calls Judge Shelton, which they called a lot of older men Judge back then. So this would be like the dad recognized John James 3 years prior as Jesse. Well, I haven't been able to research it, but is there some connection to the Shelton family here going back all the way to 1926? because John James's next stunt is to go to St. Joseph, to the land where the property where Jesse James was killed. And he takes C.E. Shelton, he takes Payne, a couple other guys, and he takes him to a tree in the yard of the house where the house was where Jesse James was killed.
Right.
And he says, I buried a gun under this tree that belonged to Charles Bigelow. And if it's still there, it has a B scratched on it. It has his initial. So they dig by that tree, and sure enough, they dig up a gun, and it has the letter B scratched on the handle. And so again, dang,
That's crazy.
everything this guy's saying is turning out to be quite true, to the point that they have pocket watches and revolvers they're digging up out of the ground. And it's just driving people nuts. So January 14th, 1932,
excuse me.
They get word from Stella James. Now, Stella James is the wife of Jesse James Jr. So,
Right.
After his death, of course, but she is Jesse James's, daughter-in-law. She never met Jesse. He had been killed when Jesse James Jr. was just a kid, but she knows a lot of the family lore and that kind of thing. So she gets wind of John James pulling this stunt, and she decides she's gonna go out to see him. She sends out a telegram that says basically, yeah, Jesse James did have a mole on his shoulder, but it was buried when Jesse James was buried. And just not buying anything that John James is saying. All the stories and family tales and dug up guns aside, Stella James is not buying it. They're convinced Jesse is still in the ground.
Right. Well,
So,
deceased, because she witnessed that. The
well,
wife of Jesse James. I was going to
yeah.
say that's something that always gives me is about the kid, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants that death photo. We want that death photo, but we already know what happened. If one existed, just like Jesse, I mean, there's this exact same community of people out there who think that photo was never Jesse. He was never killed. And I'm like, from what I understand, they propped him in ice and his wife was there.
Oh,
His
dude,
wife
they
had to like suffer through this while they pretty much kind of made a mockery of him. You know what I mean?
And
So
they took great pains to identify his body as well. Anybody they could think
absolutely,
of who
yeah.
knew him, they brought in to identify. And so Stella James sends out word around January 12th. On January 23rd, they decide, the authorities, Chief Payne, all of them decide to semi-officially, the paper said, drop the John James investigation. The governor decided not to pardon James or not to acknowledge he was Jesse James.
Right.
The owner of the hotel where James was staying, so the mayor, said the alleged Jesse James was requested by management of this hotel to leave and not return. We're no longer interested and feel that for the good of everybody, the case should be dropped. So, like, as John James is living the high life, put up in the mayor's hotel, and getting interviews, signing autographs, all that stuff, they're starting to catch on. Like, hey, this guy, I think our legs are being pulled here a little bit. Like, he's just mooching off of our hospitality. And so Jesse James Jr. at the same time released a statement saying, the man posing as Jesse James is a fake, evidently backed by a scheming showman. My father was laid to rest in mother's dooryard in April of 1882. The state of Missouri made every effort of proof of identification at that time. The foolishness must stop, or I will insist upon an arrest. And so I think, sorry, I'm just, the scheming showman part. I know throughout his career, he's been backed in the shadows by a promoter, different ones at different times. And I think that's a big tell for this kind of thing. Even J. Frank Dalton, they all have a promoter. They all have a greasy, oily snake oil salesman.
So, it's a good point. They've all got some kind of representative.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, some thought is being put into this. It is, in a sense, a performance art. You know, it's an occupation, and this guy's doing really, really well at it.
Right.
And I think right now, the promoter's name was CP O'Rourke. Later, it'll be a guy named Sam Silverman. But
Okay.
he visits John James and he starts negotiating a contract to appear in shows for the summer season.
Right.
So, but Chief Payne is still on John James's side. He still believes he's Jesse. He's sad to see John James, get with this promoter who wants to take him out of town. He blames his fellow residents for not giving him the support they should have in investigating the claims. But
Right.
I'll tell you one thing. One of the items that really kind of soured the residents on John James must have been the fact that when they dug up that pistol,
Yeah.
it did not show signs of having been underground for since 1882. So
Ah.
here's my hypothesis. This dude was such a master of the craft that he went around and buried artifacts like months prior. They said it had looked like it had been buried for maybe 5 months or so. This dude went around and like buried that gun in the yard in St. Joe and then waited half a year
Right.
and then told people there's a gun buried out there that I buried in 1882. I'll go show you. Like this is like dedication to the craft.
Right. But it's interesting that none of it, of course, without him even acknowledging or being able to realize that none of it would prove if he was Jesse or not.
Right.
Not really. I mean,
But
oh, I
but
buried a
it's
gun there. So what?
well, it's smoke and mirrors though. It's the razzle
Yeah.
dazzle. It's that
Yeah.
showmanship of they're like we'll stagger them enough to where they'll be like, "Oh, by golly, like that's
Right.
Jesse James," you know?
Well, and also in every case of these guys, they've got they've got an antagonist, right? Someone that's doesn't believe them and
Yeah.
has quite their own story to tell. So Brushy, he had quite a few. He had Mabry, he had pretty much Jarvis Garrett and all these guys that were showing up at the Mabry parole thing, in 1950. And
Yeah.
so you got all these people, and then you got Roy Hawes, his great nephew, who wrote the
Mhm.
book that says, "Hey,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, he's not Billy the Kid. Here's literally everything, all documentation, all proof you need to know who he really is." But of course, it just wasn't enough. And then later on, even his great niece, right, Geneva Pittman. So talk to me about Bessie James
Oh,
Garver.
I will. Let me just show folks this
Oh
picture
yeah.
that is allegedly Jesse James. Now this very well could be Jesse James. The caption here says Jesse James in a Long Branch, New Jersey studio in 1871. Now the
Hmm.
thing about this photo is it was used in some of the earliest publications. Um, and I want to give a shout out to Michelle Pollard who helped me with a lot of this. She's like a Jesse James expert, and I'm hoping to have her on the show sometime. She knows just about everything there is to know about Jesse James, from
Sweet.
what I can tell. But I sent her this, and I had seen it a lot, and I knew that it stood a chance of being legit. And I will say this was in a book that was published in 1880 before Jesse was even killed, so it
Hmm.
was contemporary with the time. Now, the thing is this is seems to be the photo that John James used the most. And if you see it in the newspaper articles that were reporting on John James, I do wonder if John or somebody else had altered the ears, because you'll know that they look different, and someone may have altered John James's photo himself to
Yeah.
match the ears. Yeah, I'll show you what I'm talking about as we move forward. But this could be an authentic photo, Jesse. It does look like him.
I
Um,
was gonna say it
yeah,
somewhat resembles the known ones that are authentic.
yeah. But this is this guy here it was the strongest photo he had going for him because it's such. You'll see in the reprints, it comes out very poorly in the
Right.
reprints, and I think he was able to pass that off better. But that was a photo he used. There's another photo of him. Got his
Oh,
he's
wow.
packing there. But yeah, he's but yeah, okay, look at this photo though. See, look how big that ear is, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Look how like
Holy cow.
gigantic that one is compared to how small this one is. Well,
Right.
in many reproduced photos of this picture, the one ear will be super large and one small when compared with John James. So it's like I
Right.
wonder if that has some. Look at the shading here. It does kind of like, did they really try to
Yeah, I
Photoshop this in the
agree. I
30s? Like
agree.
something's going
Yeah.
on here,
It's a little too
especially if he.
noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, look at him here.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just not adding up.
Good
But
grief.
yes, I mean these guys were dedicated. Um, but yes, we will talk. This is I'll get to that later, but we will talk about Bessie Garber James. Here's another
Oh,
shot. Yeah, look
oh,
at
is
that.
that's him?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, dude,
Um,
none of these photos even look like the same guy.
oh yeah, yeah. So getting back to where we are. So from February to April, he's lounging around Excelsior Springs, having a
Right.
great time. Well, Stella James is about to drop in, and Stella has done her own homework in California.
Right.
And so anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. She comes to Excelsior Springs and she puts out a statement. She says the James family has experienced many such instances as this man who claims to be Jesse James. In this case, however, this man who claims to be my husband's father has continued to persist in his claim. He's gone to great length in his effort to prove his identity, having made application to the governor of Missouri for a pardon. And I'll go back to Stella here. Um, I understand that he's been both accepted and rejected by the citizens of Excelsior Springs in Clay County. His claim has reached such proportions that the press has taken up his story. While the James family does not doubt for a minute that this gentleman is mistaken in his claim, I have come here from California to conduct an examination in the matter for satisfaction of everyone concerned, and at the special request of this gentleman. So John James is like writing Stella and Jesse Jr. and saying, "Hey, he's telling Jesse Jr., I'm your dad. Come out here." I mean, the balls on this guy. And
Dude.
she said, in a few days, I'll conduct a hearing. The evidence which I have will enable this man or me to provide beyond any question. So she also comes with some information she seems reluctant to share. A few days later, on April 16th, she meets with him. And then afterwards, she says, I'm convinced this man's not Jesse James. He's an imposter. His claims of being the father of my husband are false and without foundation. I'll take no action at the present, she said. But if this man persists in making claims, I'll take steps to prove exactly who he is. I have this information, and if necessary, I will reveal it to the public. So she knows something about John that she doesn't want to disclose to the public, and I think that's kind of touching. Honestly, when this is an old man who's really crossing a lot of boundaries and saying like, "Hey, I'm your husband's dead outlaw dad."
Yeah.
Like, so that tells me two things. It tells me one that she's done her homework. Okay, yeah, here, check that out. So one, she's done her homework and she knows who he is. But also number two, that she knows, having done that, having found that out, she knows he's batshit crazy and that she
Yeah.
feels bad for him. I
Right. So
don't
she
yeah.
so it's like not wanting to embarrass him,
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't want to do this. Like, please, John, I don't want to do this. But anyway, he doesn't stop, and he
Of
doesn't give
course.
up. So, she does. And what she has found is um it turns out that he has a sister. And it turns out that his sister is a doctor who lives in Los Angeles, California, the same city that Stella James lives in,
Yeah.
almost by providence. Do you hear that? My
Yes.
my my Alexa just decided to just go nuts here and tell me she can't connect to the internet. AI is going to take over. But anyway,
Yep.
yes, Dr. Bessie James Garver. a resident of Los Angeles, got in touch with Stella and said, "Hey, I've seen the pictures in the newspaper. Um, this guy's my brother." And
Yeah.
she wrote herself she herself wrote to the Standard in Excelsior Springs and said, "I've seen the picture of the man identifying himself as Jesse James, and I positively identify him as my brother, John William James, and of being no relation to the original Jesse James." She said, "My brother was never of a mentally sound mind. He's always been
Yeah.
easily persuaded into things which were told which were told to him as true. He's always wandered from place to place. He's previously acknowledged in his claims that I'm his sister." And she said that basically her brother was always kind of nuts and that she really did think that he believed he was Jesse. Like he
That
wasn't
he
a con
right.
man, like he was
Right.
really mentally ill.
Right. And then of course we're talking about things that they still didn't, weren't uh, and I guess the capability of dealing, and
Right.
diagnosing people at that time was just something that didn't happen. And, and so that makes more sense. The mental illness got so far from reality that that became his reality, and that he couldn't be convinced otherwise because his mind didn't know the difference. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
was reading this here and it says my brother William John James was born in the year 1856 on a farm near Lena, Illinois, and says that he's always been influenced by Jesse James ever since he was a kid. And it said it reached a point where his mother and father forbade him to
yeah,
read any more about Jesse James because of how far he was taking that belief.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so looking into it, I took Bessie. I took that name, Bessie James Garver, and I found his family. Bessie was a physician. The family was from Iowa. So John and Bessie's parents, Preston Burns James and Sarah Ann Locker, they lived in Illinois for a time, and that's where John James was born. Then they moved to Iowa, and they had at least 9 children that I could find. There could have been
Damn.
more who kind of
Yeah.
maybe some died young. But by 1863, the James family moved to Chickasaw, Iowa, which is ironic because we spent all last episode talking about the king of the Chickasaws. Like,
Right.
but
And then
John
just
and
to hear that
Bessie's
name again. Yeah.
right, right. So we have John W. James on the 1870 census. In 1878, their mom dies,
Right.
right? And a year later, their dad dies. Okay, so by
Yeah.
1880, there are no parents. Okay, and John James was born about 1856, I think, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. No, yeah, 1856. So I mean, this is still a young kid. He's lost both of his parents, and all the children have. The children who are too young to have been married at this time on the 1880 census are living with siblings that have already married and grown up. Um, and the oldest sibling, Arminta James, she died in Montana in 1910. Let me see. There was Sarah James. Now, Sarah James, a sister of John, she spent all of her adult life in the Iowa Hospital for the Insane. Okay,
Wow.
so like we're talking decades. She lived and died in the Iowa Hospital for the Insane.
Man.
Bessie married a very famous physician in the area, and they divorced like 9 years later. And seems like all her life she just was a professional, living in that professional world in Los Angeles, and doesn't seem to have remarried. There was a brother, Clark James, who was born in 1859. He moved to Nevada and became a stage driver. Told people that uh, I got a picture of him here. I'll show you guys. Told people that he knew the James gang and all that, but he never seemed to have completely lost his marbles. He was a stage driver most of his life, faro dealer, gambler, never married. But yeah, this is his brother, Clark James. Now,
Huh.
Marcus James, another brother, like his sister Sarah, spent most of his adult life in a insane asylum in South Dakota. So this, I mean, this kind of mental illness issue seems to have really plagued that James family in a very
Yeah.
sad way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like we're talking now. There were some like Bessie and Clark who lived, you know, long
Yeah.
lives,
Normal,
and
healthy
yeah,
lives.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're talking three siblings at least who just weren't there
Mm,
mentally. And so
yeah. That's
yeah,
rough.
we've got John James who traveled the world. You know, at first traveled the country saying he was a cousin to Jesse James because he was so
Right.
infatuated with the James stories. And then eventually he just became Jesse James. And you got to
Right.
think, how many times did he travel through Missouri and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
did you know Jesse James?" and heard these folks tell their stories
Right.
so that by
Yeah.
the time 1932 rolled around, he could repeat them back to them,
Right.
you
He's a
know.
master at all these tales, and just weaves them together. And I guess if you're really good at speaking, it's a
Yeah.
it's a good proponent to get people to listen to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, Stella James did eventually come out with that and kind of kill the momentum, but he didn't give up a bit on, you know,
Oh,
around
of course not.
February around February of 1933, he was telling folks in Missouri that he was getting ready to head to Nebraska. And so he stayed in Nebraska for a while. He said he was with a relative named Frank Welty. Now, I looked into Frank Welty, and I'm pretty sure these are folks that he just convinced he was related to via Jesse James, you know, because
Okay, I got you.
they
Yeah.
believed he was Jesse James. And so he's in McCook, Nebraska, telling the Charlie Bigelow story. So at least by 1933, he has begun, you know, pushing the Charlie Bigelow narrative. Um, and he's performing at local theaters in Nebraska. So he's finding that career path, that showman, you know, occupation where he can make a little money at this. If he's not going to get a pardon or convince the folks in Missouri, he's at least going to go on tour and do his thing, which I think honestly that's what it's all about. I think if you look at their motives, you kind of see that it's more about making a career out of it
Yeah.
than it is
Yeah.
about the truth or like, hey, this is who I really am. And you see
Yeah.
that with all of them. But he goes to Colorado, you know, he's touring around, and I think he really makes a mistake by going to California into the serpent's den for him, basically, directly going to where Stella James lived.
He goes to her house.
Yeah, well, pretty much. He floods them with telegrams. He does meet with her attorney and basically threatens to kill him, uh, you know, for misrepresenting him. And, you know, he sets up a stand on the pier at Ocean City or Ocean Park and around Pasadena, I believe. And he's, you know, he's just on his sideshow and telling people he's Jesse James and um you know, telling them basically that crime doesn't pay. That's the hook.
Of
And
course.
so yeah, yeah. So hearing that John James was in her own town and causing trouble, Stella James filed an affidavit and also an insanity complaint. And she's claiming that John had come to Los Angeles threatening to kill her attorney, Charles Thompson. And there's another family friend named Billy Judson, who they say rode with Jesse James, was part of his gang. Um, John apparently accosted both of them, brandishing two guns and threatening to kill him. And he had been flooding Jesse and Stella with telegrams, insisting she go to Missouri and help him get the pardon. And so he was arrested, and he appeared before Superior Judge Thomas C. Gold on September 28th. And he, the Los Angeles Evening Citizen, said he used all of his eloquence to convince Judge Gold of his true identity.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, he was really charismatic and a likable old man. The judge did not acknowledge that he was Jesse James. He wouldn't rule on that. He said the purpose of this hearing is to determine whether John James is insane or not. So
Right.
I'm not here to judge whether he's Jesse James or not, just whether he is insane and needs committed or not.
Right.
And two psychiatrists were brought on board to make that determination. They interviewed him and had their meetings. And at the end of the whole process, the two psychiatrists were like, he's not crazy. They were like, he has a really good memory and he has a really good like imagination. He's very mentally present for an old timer, but he's not
Yeah.
crazy. And they
Huh.
seemed taken with him, and the judge liked him. And so at the end of the whole ordeal, the judge was like, either you're a really bad bandit or you're a really good liar.
Yeah.
And so they let him go. Um, it's just nuts. I mean, could you imagine being Stella James and there's this guy who is, yeah, he said either you're a great bandit or a great liar. I just found that quote. But you know, you're legitimately the daughter-in-law of Jesse James. You're fighting these imposters who are flooding you with telegrams and trying to get you to buy on with them that they're your father-in-law who died in 1882, and the courts and everybody is like, yeah, I mean, he's a nice guy. Keep letting him go.
And he even got arrested in your neck of the woods, kind of.
Oh yeah, he's basically at their front door.
Yeah, he got arrested in Charleston, West Virginia.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So he sticks around California almost as like a biting his thumb to Stella, and
Right.
he keeps doing his thing. Well, the Illinois, I honestly think Stella put him up to this. I think Stella called the Illinois authorities and were like, "Hey, come get your guy, your parole violator. You tried in Missouri. He's out here bothering me. Come pick him up because he's still a parole violator. They still want him for
Right.
jumping parole after getting out for murder. So they're still on his trail. So they do. They put in an extradition request. John James is arrested again in 1934, and he's taken to Los Angeles, and he meets with the governor, and he pleads with the governor to refuse extradition. He's like, "Look, if the only reason they're doing this is because Stella James doesn't want me here, and I'm an old man. Um, just let me stay here. Deny the
Yeah.
authorities." And in the meantime, he has sued Stella James. He's brought a lawsuit to her and her children, saying they've caused his arrest twice, and
Uh,
he's suing them for $89,000. And he tells the governor, if you fight extradition and let me stay in California, I'll forget about the suit. And so I think if you read between the lines, he was allowed to stay in California. I think he dropped that lawsuit and kind of they reached an agreement, Stella James, him and the
yeah.
governor. They were like, look, if he just shuts up and drops the lawsuit, we'll stop pushing the matter. And the governor refused extradition and he was still a free man in California. Now, the problem is he decides this is a great time to go on tour. So he's yeah, I've got free of extradition, so I'm going to go to other states where the Illinois authorities can get me. So basically, he hits all the states, and he's touring around with Hank Ferris and Ann Alexander, who do like trick roping and lasso stuff and all that. And so it's a like an old medicine show. He goes around and tells people crime doesn't pay, talks about his bank robberies as Jesse James, and they
Right.
come out and do little lasso tricks, and boom, you've had a good Friday night at a theater. And
And you know what? I can picture it. I can
dude,
picture that. I can picture everyone just being amazed and
absolutely,
bedazzled by his stories and his tricks. It's like, dude,
yeah, absolutely. And so, there he is. Look at this shot of him here. Got
oh, don't mess
his
with this bad
That's
boy.
right,
Look at
that's
him.
right. This was when he found the gun. He's holding the gun, if you can see,
Yeah.
um, with Bigelow's initials on it
Here's the
that
gun
he
I
pla
buried.
yeah, showing folks where it is. I mean, there were so many pictures of him. ironically, in the newspapers. That's him talking to a guy about when he was determined whether he was insane or not in California. This guy,
I mean,
but
I'm sorry, but some of these photos, I just would automatically think this guy is he's either a great stage actor, like he's a good theater actor, he has that look, or he is just downright insane.
oh man, well, I mean, there's a lot of crazy people who are just great to be around and a fun time, and I'm sure if you allowed him to play out his Jesse James myth,
Yeah,
you'd definitely have an interesting evening.
sure.
You know,
Sure.
that's a great promotional shot of him right there.
Oh, that
Look
is a
at
pretty cool picture.
that.
You know?
Oh my
Well,
goodness.
and that's another thing interesting thing too is that like so many photos of him get printed in these articles as the years goes on, when the real Jesse had very few.
Yeah.
It's
This
just
is a full page spread they did on him in
good grief,
1938.
man.
Yeah, look at that. But you'll see down here is him in his wagon, you know. And the this an example of a card he would hand out, Jesse James, I'm alive.
Oh, he had a card.
Oh yeah, and that's why I titled this episode as well, the original Jesse James, that he would go around telling people I'm the original Jesse James. That was like his phrase. He was the original Jesse James. And so yeah, zoomed in on that wagon photo.
Wow.
Yeah. Just so much, so many photos, good photos of him. Yeah, but
Yes.
if you look, Jesse was always noted for having an upturned nose, very noticeable. And
Yeah.
John just didn't have that at
No,
all.
they don't look alike at all.
Yeah. Yeah, here's what I'm trying to get to. See and talk to Jesse James at the White Theater Hayes Center. So this is an example of the kind of bill he would put out um, on his tour. Come talk to the
See
real
and
Jesse
talk to
James.
Jesse James. Yeah.
Yes, here's another one. Jesse James, he is alive. Um, and he would show this. I think this may very well be actually John James in his youth. The famous outlaw, it says this is how he looked shortly after his own funeral, which he attended in St. Joseph. But I think that might actually be a real picture of John James.
It's possible.
Yeah, I think we might actually have a youth photo of the guy there that he was handing out. But yeah, I mean, he went on tour, having a great time, well into 1938, and Illinois just kept trying to catch him, and they wired a guy, a cop in Kentucky, and they sent him a telegram and said, "Hey, we're trying to catch this guy," and the guy in Kentucky said he was just here. It was Sheriff of Boyd County, Kentucky, E.K. Rose. He said, "This guy was just here. He's in West Virginia now. And I know he performed in Huntington, West Virginia, which is about 40 minutes west of where I am." He goes, "So I assume his next stop will be Charleston, which is about 10 minutes east of where I am." And so Charleston's my stomping ground. I mean, that's basically the city I'm part of. And
Right.
he said, "So I think you might find him there." So Illinois officials wired the authorities in Charleston, West Virginia, and Lieutenant C.W. Ray of the West Virginia State Police went to John James's performance and arrested him.
Nice.
And yep, and they sent him back to Illinois and he was put into jail. So that was in June of 1938. And John went back to jail until March of 1940. So we know where he was for for that year and some months. He was in the penitentiary in Menard, Illinois. But he was paroled, and then he went back to Kentucky into the care of a farmer, and that was his, parole area. And
Yeah, I
after
saw
that,
him.
yeah, and after that, he kind of disappears from the narrative until his death in 1947. So for the last few years, he was kind of just off the record, but he did die in Arkansas in 1947. And I want to read something here from I have the book by Stella James, In the Shadow of Jesse James. Really good book, really interesting book about her life, how she
Right.
met Jesse's son, and This is just really good read. I enjoyed it. But at the end, she talks about John James, and then she says, John James died in the state hospital for the mentally ill at Little Rock, Arkansas on December 24th, 1947. Now, listen to this. A year and a half after John James's death, a new Jesse James was brought out with fanfare by two reporters in Lawton, Oklahoma. And this man came to Los Angeles with new promoters, but with the same affidavits that John James had obtained in Excelsior Springs. The old man was Frank Dalton.
Yeah.
He was an invalid and was moved to and from airplanes on a stretcher and in an ambulance with a nurse. This outfit gained publicity by giving out a false story that Jesse Jr. was going to visit his old father. Um, she so Jesse James and Lee Houck, who was I'm sorry, Frank Dalton and Lee Houck, who was Frank's promoter, they showed
Yeah.
up with the same papers that John James had. And there is an article in the Texas newspaper out of Paris, Texas. And I don't have it here, but I will post it after the show because it just came to me. But this gentleman is he's sharing recollections of Frank Dalton. And he says there was one time around 1934 or so that me and Frank Dalton and someone else went to Tyler, Texas, because we heard that Jesse James was there.
Yeah.
And he describes visiting this old man who claimed to be Jesse James, and the man had all kinds of old paperwork and affidavits and stuff. And he said, me and my companion went back to Paris, Texas, but Frank Dalton stayed there for a while with the promoter, and they went into a private room and had a private conference. And Frank Dalton came back to Paris, hours later or the next day with some money. And I think my personal hypothesis is that that moment is when Frank Dalton first learned of John James back around 34 or 35.
Yeah.
And
That
I
makes sense.
think, yeah, and I think that when John James died on Christmas Day, 1947, I don't think it's an accident that in May of 1948, about 5 months later,
Yeah.
Frank Dalton comes out as Jesse James with the same affidavits and paperwork as John James.
How
And
do you think he got the same paperwork?
I think Lee Houck and Frank tracked down John's old manager and we're like, hey, we'll buy these
Oh
off
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
We'll take these off your hands. You're not going to make any more money off of John James. And so Frank Dalton, it turns out, is not an imposter of Jesse James. He's an imposter of an imposter, which is even kind of more sad.
That's crazy.
But John James was the original, the OG Jesse James imposter who put in the
The OG
work.
imposter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got the affidavits, buried the guns and watches, and unfortunately, it was Frank James who reaped the fame and notoriety. And if Frank Dalton, if Frank Dalton wasn't so bad off physically when he came out with his claim, he might have done better.
Yeah.
And if John James wasn't wanted and had to keep running from the law in Illinois, he might have done better. But if you want my take on it, John James was a much more interesting and capable imposter than J. Frank Dalton.
He definitely had, I gotta say, he has the most potential out of all of them that I've read so far.
Yeah.
Like the potential to be the biggest imposter in the world. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, like you were talking about how when you really look at the details of what they were claiming, Brushy is not a very charismatic guy.
No.
Look how far this guy was willing to go. And I'm not
Oh
saying it's a
man.
good thing, but yeah, it actually really just displays his
Oh, yeah,
mental instability. Yeah, I mean,
I'll tell people that one thing we didn't cover. John James had no missing fingers. Jesse James had a missing middle finger on his left hand.
that's
John
right.
James did not let that slow him down a bit. He just said, no, that's not true. Like he took documented history and was like, "Nah,
Right.
I still got all my fingers, bro. I got them." I
Nope,
mean, it
that's not
just
true.
and
I
kept
grew it
rolling.
back.
Yeah. I mean, this dude, I mean, he was the David Blaine of outlaw imposters. You
Yeah.
know, is the gun under the tree and everybody freaks out.
Well, I mean, and you think about the same thing with I've always I used to bring that up all the time when I first started learning about Brushy. There's all these photos of Brushy, granted later in life for the most part, but I've always like, where's his buck teeth? Where's his truly noticeable buck teeth? And
Yeah.
again, there was no momentum lost by anyone. I mean, I heard everything from, oh, they shot him out of his mouth to he had him pulled for whatever reason. Yeah, I'm just like, ugh, the
Hmm.
convenience that you guys have is nuts. But yeah, I've always wondered things like that. And again, missing finger documented, all fingers, tons of
Yeah.
photos where he's showing his hands and it shows you he has all of
Yeah.
his fingers.
Yeah. What I always liked what Steve Eng, this writer, said about J. Frank Dalton, and I think it's applicable to any of these cats. He says Frank Dalton is a splendid cosmic charlatan. He reeks of snake oil, shell games, and sawdust. And I mean, John Wilson just said, "Thing is, we're still talking about him," and I think that's what draws me to him. I mean, I love to still talk about him in their own right.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to talk about how he was really Jesse James. I don't want to talk about
Yeah,
how
that's not
Brushy
what we're doing.
was
Yeah, we're
really
actually
Billy.
just
Yeah,
yeah, we're showing the true history and why these people
yeah,
are
yeah. And
false, they're
these
imposters, they're
guys, I
liars,
mean,
they're snakes. When everyone
the
goes, yeah, we're talking about them, so that means it's keeping so and so's history alive. Again, no,
no,
it's just
no,
you going, here's the historical facts, and here's where,
no,
his
yeah.
entire story falls apart. And, you
Yeah, I'm
should be
keeping
able to.
this guy's audacity alive. That and this scarf. I don't want anybody to ever forget this scarf that this guy's wearing right now. Look at that beauty.
He looks like a British theater host.
Oh man. Yeah, absolutely. I bet he was a trip to know. But yeah, when Bessie committed him, you know, I think it was the final time to Arkansas. I think she said it's getting so bad that I'm worried he might be a danger to people. I mean, shit, he
Yeah.
shot a man in 26, like shot and killed him. So yeah, he's a danger to people.
And he shot him really based on absolutely nothing.
Yep,
Like
50 cents.
I'm gonna beat 50 cents out of you. Well, okay. You didn't even wait to see if he'd actually
Yeah.
try to beat it out of you.
So yeah. So that's the
No way.
story of John James. And I think anybody who is seriously digging into J. Frank Dalton would do well to know the story of John James. Guy from Iowa, parents Preston James and Sarah James, crazy guy, came up with the Charlie Bigelow thing. It started with him.
Right.
Frank Dalton stole it all from John James. So don't be
Wow.
claiming John that Frank Dalton's Jesse James. But Iowa Joe says if you want a really bad Jesse imposter, look up James L. Courtney. And yeah, that's the guy I won't even go into. It just gets so I mean, your head would explode, Doss, at the
Yeah.
just ignorance of historical documents and everything. But yeah, that's the life of John James. That's the original Jesse James right there.
Wow. And what's interesting too is that again, not like I've already stated, I don't know a lot about Jesse, but I'm familiar enough with Dalton, and mainly from things you've done over the last 2, 3 years, because I know you've always been, working on these timelines and building these things. And it's interesting that yeah, I until you brought it up, I had never heard of this guy. I had never heard of him, but
Right.
Dalton seems to be the more prominent name, and I don't know why that is when you've literally just laid out all the cards as to how this worked out for Dalton. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
does make sense. Yeah. I mean, and again, why? Why wouldn't he had come out a year before? Why didn't he come out? No, no, he's not Jesse James. That guy, John James. No, I'm Jesse James. And you're right. He dies and then just kind of slowly but surely pokes his head out and now begins a whole new charade.
Yeah. And I think he was convinced by someone else that Dalton was convinced because Dalton consistently said, you know, I viewed Jesse James's body and all this. And then it just changed miraculously after 1947 when John James died. And yeah, I mean, I think if you understand John James and if you're aware of his story, then the story of J. Frank Dalton becomes much clearer.
Yeah, it really does to me. It definitely, you can see where it's almost like he's like, okay, I'm going to literally just take this and run with it. But what's interesting, again, even in this time frame, again, researching and communication is a little bit different. But I mean, it's interesting that nobody was able to put those things together like you can put them together now.
Yeah,
Looking at someone's timeline of, here's where he pops up saying this, here's where he goes to prison for killing someone, here's where he's arrested in California, you know what I mean, here's where he goes to West Virginia. You
right.
have all of these things. You just, everyone wants to see what they just want to see.
Yeah. Well, we
And
live in a
I
great time for history, and it might even continue to get better. But we really are blessed to be able to look at all these things and be able to.
oh yeah,
It's
oh
just
yeah,
such a
I love that we live in the era of powerful and prominent technology, but mainly
yeah,
for that reason. I mean, there are so many things. I think it's great that you can, you know, if you want to go the real simple way, you can ask Alexa, you can ask Siri, you can ask Google,
yeah,
and it could be something as simple to get you started. And I've gone there, from that before and just started, researching, and that's a good way to start, you know. But it's very interesting that I was talking about Jesse's death photo, right? We've seen these online.
yeah,
Excuse me. And this, like you said, the ignorance and people that were just, just enthralled with these stories and ran with them and whatnot. While simultaneously, we've talked about this similarities with a kid. Well, where was the death photo? You could explain that to someone over and over and over again. You're still going to have to explain it to someone numerous times over and over again later on, because it's just going to be a question that's always going to be asked. Why wasn't his photo taken? Well,
yeah.
and like you said, with Jesse, they go to an undeniable level to prove that it was him, down to documentation, missing fingers, everything. And they prop him up, put him on ice, and his wife is there. Like, you have family members that can say this is Jesse. And like John Wilson said 5 minutes ago, we're still talking about it because we know there are probably millions of people out there who personally believe that Brushy was Billy or that Jesse wasn't killed by Bob Ford. I mean, I've heard a lot. And they still go strong too. Even with
Yeah.
this kind of documentation that's obvious. You know what I mean? It just goes to show, if let's say we had a death photo of Billy, that we would still be in the exact same spot we are today.
Yeah.
Because everyone would be like, well, that's not him.
Yeah.
How do
They
you
just
know
say
that's him?
that's Billy Barlow.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Whatever
Yeah.
they can do to shift the goalpost and keep the mystery alive. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Sadly. But yeah,
Yeah,
look, we've covered this and successfully in a single episode, no part two. So next week we'll have a brand new topic to be able to dig into.
absolutely. We've got a couple of things to choose from, and I figure we'll figure that out in the next few
Yeah,
days, and we'll create a post and let everybody know which direction we're headed next week. But we have some suggestions from the audience and a couple of things that we've been working on. So, and I've got a new thing, a new
yeah.
gentleman from my neck of the woods that I
All
have
right.
come across and have not a blossoming interest quite yet, but it's getting there. It's getting there.
Oh,
I came
good.
across him randomly, and the first
Well,
thing I thought
that's
of
the
is
best. It's the best to come across randomly like that.
absolutely, absolutely, and one where there's very significant photos and details, and one of these situations where everything I've read, even to this day, no one knows why this gentleman did what he did.
Oh
It's
man.
a crazy story. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah,
listen, Colin says he wants a T-shirt with this guy on it. That's our first merch idea right there. I really want that. That's a
right.
great idea. Colin, let us know what image we should use of him, And let's get this design out. I want somebody to come up with a t-shirt for this because I would wear a John
Yeah.
James t-shirt.
And it just needs a good, like, some kind of, maybe the Forever West
Yeah, the
logo or
logo,
something on
and
there and
it
some
just
kind
needs
of
to say
catchy
like
line about imposters.
that, or the original Jesse James or whatever. Just tag it, and I'd wear it. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Dawson, you want to
Thanks,
see us
everyone.
out?
Absolutely. We will see everyone next Thursday at Forever West Old Time Radio Hour. See